million, and they'll give you recommendations for that. Generally, unless you put down a lot of manure recently or just have a load of compost in your garden, you're going to see your nitrogen levels as being a little bit low. And that's because nitrogen leaches out of the soil. Nitrogen can leach out of the soils with rainfall. So it's not something that necessarily sticks around. So even if you put down a nitrogen fertilizer in the springtime, after a bunch of heavy rains in the spring, sometimes that nitrogen won't be around in the summertime. So, and that nitrogen can leach, calcium can leach out of your soil. That's why your calcium levels, that's why we have to lime pretty much over time is 5, 10, 15 years over time, you're always going to have lower and lower and lower calcium levels in the Northeast because we get a lot of rainfall over the course of the year. The other things under the nutrient levels you see are phosphorus and potassium. So those are the other two nutrients under the N, P, and K. If you were to go buy a bagged fertilizer, the N, P, and K, that's the numbers that you see, like 5, 10, 10. Phosphorus is also incredibly important, and if it's low like this, you're going to have to look to find something to supply phosphorus. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but I believe it was this sheet. Oh no, it's this sheet here, supplying individual nutrients. Everybody get that?
Yes. So it may be on the back side of one of those.
Yeah, it talks about lime too. It's got all kinds of information. It'll tell you if you need phosphorus on the back of this. See, did anybody find that?
What's on the side?
It's the other side says using lime in fertilizers. It feels like we're going back to school with all this paperwork.
Yeah.
It's nice to have paperwork though, because you can go back and yep, you got the right one. You can go back and look at it the next day and think about it. Thank you for making these copies. This was helpful. On the back side, it says, what if you need a 1/4 pound phosphorus? And it has, you could put on 3 to 4 pounds of bone meal. So it's on the. So if we're talking about phosphorus,
Go ahead.
yeah, that's all right. If you're talking about phosphorus, they can recommend here 3 to 4 pounds of bone meal. That would be my recommended source of phosphorus because that's an organic source. Hasn't been, it's ground up bones, so it is what it is, but it hasn't been chemically altered in a way. The triple superphosphate, I don't think of that as really actually very healthy for your soils because it has been chemically altered in a way that it tends to be very harsh on your biology. We're talking a lot about chemistry today, but we also want to think about the biology of our soils. So farmers will often use something called soft rock phosphate or colloidal phosphate for their phosphorus. That's something you could get through the NOFA bulk order. You just soft rock phosphate. Colloidal. Colloidal. And I'm just going to check. So calcium, we talked about calcium. One of the reasons calcium was so important is because it acts kind of as this door person for other nutrients. Phosphorus, to give you an idea, make sure I'm giving you guys correct information. I was going to look and see if I had mine. Phosphorus, to give you an idea, it plays a role in photosynthesis in your plants. And so it also is really connected to sugar production. So if you want your melons to taste really sweet, or you want your tomatoes to taste really sweet, you're going to want to make sure you have your phosphorus levels at an adequate level. And some farmers will say calcium and phosphorus are the two most important things to focus on when you're thinking about modifying the soil.
Which one of these prevents stem rot?
Stem rot or the end rot, the blossom end rot?
Blossom end rot.
Blossom end rot is mostly related to calcium deficiencies. It also can be related to uneven watering. But I'll tell you this, if your calcium levels are where they need to be, your uneven watering won't be a problem. So yeah, you can, and calcium, lime is the preferred source for calcium. Soft rock phosphate, which I mentioned as a phosphorus source, also has some calcium in it. And then gypsum is the other nutrient that you could buy for calcium, it won't change your pH. So if you have a pH that's already where you want it to be, you could use gypsum. But the gypsum, that calcium tends not to stick around. It tends to be like just an annual application of gypsum. So that'll help with blossom end rot. Yeah, if we have questions about specific garden issues, we can definitely get into that in just a few minutes. So real quickly, I'll just talk about the other two major nutrients that they give you information on here. Potassium, this one, and this is pretty typical. If the garden, if it's just been a grassland, it's a yard, you're not going to generally have real high levels of nutrients because you guys haven't been fertilizing that with, endless compost, I assume, right?
No, and it also hasn't had
Lime.
any fertilizer at all.
Yeah.
And it also had no artificial fertilizer.
Exactly. So
Nothing.
So that can be a good thing because even though these pHs aren't so good and there's not a lot of nutrient levels, your guess would be the biology out there is in okay shape because there haven't been poisons put down, which is a really nice thing. So potassium's measuring low as well, and again, referring back to the supplying individual nutrients, they're talking about what types of thing you can use for potassium. Wood ash you can use, but it will raise your soil pH, so you have to be careful where your soil pH is. They also recommend a few other things called muriate of potash or potassium sulfate. Those are chemical fertilizers, and you're welcome to use them, but I would not recommend them. I think there's a couple other products, and you might have to, again, look for them through an OFA bulk order or talk with your farm store. But the two sources of potassium that I think are great sources, one is called sulfomag, and that's a rock. It's spelled out SULPOMAG, and that has sulfur, potassium, and magnesium in it. That is just a ground up rock. The rock is limonite. It's a rock that's, I think actually maybe has origins in the ocean. But there's nothing really dangerous about using sulfomag, and it's a pretty good source of potassium. That's something that some garden stores will have it, some won't. It's one of those ones, it's definitely an alternative fertilizer, but some places will have that sulfomag. The other thing to think about for potassium is something called green sand. Green sand, again, it's a similar thing. It's a rock. It doesn't have as much potassium as sulfomag, so you have to put a lot more of it on to get an impact. And a lot of the things that I talk about, and I didn't discuss this at the beginning, but when I'm focusing on fertilizing and I'm focusing on doing things for the soils, my sole focus is really to build the soil up and let the soil feed the plants. I'm not really interested in short-term fixes with water-soluble fertilizers. So a lot of the fertilizers I like to focus on are rock mineral fertilizers that are over time going to fertilize your soils, and then those soils are going to be creating your healthy plants.
What about the weed that comes from Westport? The waters, the ocean water. If I use that, I did one time because I was told that that's very good for the soil.
Seaweed.
Seaweed.
Yeah. I think seaweed is a terrific source of using it as a compost ingredient or using it as a mulch. I haven't used seaweed recently because we just moved back to this part of the country. There is some concern, I think, if you put down tons of it every single year that it might have certain things concentrated in it. But the reason I like seaweed is when you look at this soil test, you don't have to pull this up, but when you look at this soil test, they really only talk about probably 10 to 14 different nutrients.